May I invite Julie to introduce to us what is Waldorf and how is its practice in Hong Kong? Okay.
Okay, we can begin. So where does the name Waldorf come from? The first Waldorf school was founded in 1919 by Rudolf Steiner for the children of employees of the Waldorf Astoria cigarette factory in Stuttgart. So Steiner or Waldorf school education is now described as the largest worldwide independent school movement, with over 870 schools globally in over 60 countries and more than 2,000 kindergartens worldwide. In Hong Kong, there are various groups that have formed in different locations, and there are parent and child groups offered, preschool, through to the first grades of primary. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what drew me to Waldorf education in the first place. I actually worked as a kindergarten teacher in Hong Kong, starting in 1985. And I worked in schools in the New Territories and then another school on Hong Kong Island. And after I had the first two of my children, I have 4 children, I decided that I wanted something a bit different because I'd seen from the inside what happens in kindergartens, and I knew I wanted something different. And I went on a journey and studied Montessori education, and I also did counseling and play therapy, and came to Steiner education because there was something in there that touched me. And it was about getting in touch with our inner knowledge, with an instinct that we actually all have as parents. And I remember battling with this instinct as a parent in Hong Kong, with a lot of pressures from the outside, from people telling me what I needed to do for my children so that they wouldn't fall behind. And yet there was always something inside that said, oh, but it just doesn't feel right. And when I found Waldorf education, something fell into place for me. So I think Rudolf Steiner, was trying to meet the needs of children by developing in us, as parents or teachers, this instinct as to what we need to do for the children. And I think many of us have lost it in the face of society today. So I just want to ask you a question as parents, and it's to think of the qualities that you would like to see in your children when they grow up. And I think when we've done this before in workshops, these are the most common words that come to mind for people. Obviously, we all want our children to be happy. Deeper things like to be who they really are, or even something we might not have thought of, to be creative, but also to be able to get things done. So not enough just to be creative and have an imagination, but to actually be able to do something with it. And so the next question that so many parents will ask is, how do you prepare my child for school? This is a very frequently asked question in kindergartens. And I would say this comes from 2 things. One of them, obviously, is love. Everyone loves their child and they want them to do well in the environment. But it also comes from fear. Fear that if there aren't certain things done early enough, then the child is going to struggle at the next stage. But I would ask you to think maybe that isn't quite the right question, because let's compare to someone asking me a question at my age now. Have I thought about how I'm going to prepare when I get to the old people's home? Because it's not that far off, possibly. And will I know how to use a walking frame when I get there? And if I don't, then I better start practicing now. And that's a useful kind of metaphor, really, for what we're trying to do with very young children in the preschool. It's like, why can we not allow them to enjoy life right now and be children now? Just as why would I start using a walking frame? Because I might need it soon, and if I don't know how to use it, I might get anxious. So I think Yes, I want to, there's so much to say, and I'm trying to get it all in 15 minutes. But I say it's out of fear. So parents want early childhood educators to teach their children the alphabet, their colours, their numbers, to teach them to write their name, to sit still on the carpet. But if you think about this list, it's a very poor, impoverished kind of curriculum. Because all children, when they get to school, will learn to sit still on the mat. But only if they've learnt the most basic skill of all, which is to how to be a social being in a social setting. And in my work with play therapy, I've worked with so many children in primary schools who have not yet got this skill because of their environment, because of what they've been exposed to, and they can't learn. So they come to play therapy to learn their social and emotional skills before they can even begin academics. And Steiner said this very quote that's quite famous, that the healthy social life is found when in the mirror of each soul, the whole community finds its reflection, and when in the whole community, the virtue of each one is living. And what he's saying here, he's talking about a very common dilemma that we have as humans, that we all want to connect and we all want to fit in our community and society. But at the same time, we feel individual and separate, and we value individuality. So the question is, particularly for education, how do we learn to value ourselves as an individual while being able to effectively give back to society? Because it's that's going to satisfy us in the future. So how does Waldorf education help? Well, we just briefly look at a description of how Steiner described the development of the human being. And he would said that we developed in 7-year phases. And science does prove, in fact, that in 7 years, every single atom in our body, in our being, is different. And it takes 7 years for us to change every cell in our body. In the first 7 years, 0 to 7, this is what we're talking about today, early childhood education. Children are building up their bodies, we know that. They need to move, they learn through movement. That's what he referred to as the willing and the hands. So that means using the hands to learn. You know, the intellect is formed through children experimenting and doing. And Montessori obviously said this too, and she called it the absorbent mind, which he refers to as an unconscious mind, meaning that the child can't yet grasp hold of abstract concepts. So they need to see things, but they're absorbing everything unconsciously. And unconscious learning is very powerful. So he recommended to teachers, whatever stage they were teaching at, whether it was the primary, which is appealing to the feelings, the emotion, the rhythm and the heart and the memory, or the secondary education, which is the intellect, debating, thinking, and very conscious learning. That teachers need to be aware of the stages of development, and the curriculum needs to adapt to the child's development and not the other way around. So these are the essential features of a Waldorf school. So again, child development should guide the curriculum. There isn't a definite approach to art and creativity. The most important one, maybe the most important two I'd like to talk about today, is the teacher's reflective activity and a family support and adult education within the school. These are just some examples of features that you might see in a Waldorf school, but again, we're looking at the kindergarten. So the art, the creativity, the relationship with the teachers, the child-led education, activities which are initiated by the child, and the team of teachers who work together and who actually have great control over what happens in the school. So the teachers form a college and they work with admin and finance to make the best decisions, always with the child as a priority. I'll skip that one. So Steiner's saying you need to get back in touch with your inner wisdom, and you need to learn to know what it is and how the children are learning. And he would say the same as this: teachers need the courage to face it. We teach who we are the curriculum. And Steiner also said, you can't learn how to be a good teacher from a book. You need to look at the children. The same as Montessori said, you need to learn to observe and see what the children need. So the features of a kindergarten, I've got some photos of each particular heading here. The home-like environment, these are examples of what a classroom can look like in a Waldorf kindergarten. The use of natural materials, because these simple, open-ended materials can stimulate the child's creativity and thought processes. And a child is a being that absorbs everything about the environment. And so you need to think about colour and beauty and order. Let me just go on to the next one. Real work for a real purpose. I think this is one of the distinguishing features of a Waldorf school, that the teachers model for the child meaningful, purposeful work. So activities such as cleaning, gardening, cooking, and even the crafts, which will go with the festivals, all have a purpose. They're not artificially structured activities, but they're done, we talked about before, a meaning for the child of belonging to a community. These children are really going to eat what they've made. They need it for their morning snack. They're going to do something with the craft. There's a particular festival and they need that to decorate the room. We need to clean the boots because they get muddy. And we need to wash the cloths because we're going to use them later. I think when the young child is engaged in this way, the learning is deep-rooted and there's a strong message for the rest of the child's life. They're not just practicing skills, but they're experiencing a sense of belonging and feeling of inclusion. They're also learning through these activities, let's not forget, the foundations of literacy and numeracy as they restore order and sequence, as they measure and count, and they experience the properties of sand and water using small and large movements, hand-eye coordination, but all of this is absorbed deeply and unconsciously in the way that nature intended best for children to learn. Imitation, a huge aspect of early childhood education. With the unconscious learning, they're absorbing everything about us. We tell our children how to be, and they keep mirroring back to us what we are. That is a scary thought. And I'm sure many parents will have heard themselves in their children once they start talking. I wondered where that word came from. Good or bad. And the Steiner says the same thing. You will not be a good teacher if you focus only on what you do and not upon what you are, because what you are is what the children care about. Imagination and play is a huge aspect of the Waldorf kindergarten curriculum. And I think many of us know that these days. Obviously, we know it's the key to creative thinking. And if you have enough time each day, then what an observer in a kindergarten would see would be the children using all sorts of strange materials that don't mean much maybe to the adult, but for the child produce endless possibilities of play. So you actually don't need that much equipment in the room because there are hundreds of different ways of using it. And the way that the child uses the equipment really is an intellectual activity, the beginning of thought. One of the most dynamic buzzwords today is executive function. And there was a very interesting article in CNN where it says every day where we work, we see our young students struggling with the transition from home to school. All wonderful kids, but some can't share easily or listen in a group. Some have impulse control problems and trouble keeping their hands to themselves. And some are suffering from separation anxiety. We're not talking about preschool children. These are Harvard undergraduates whom we teach and advise. They all know how to work, but some of them haven't learned how to play. I think that's really interesting. How am I doing for time? Have I got 5 minutes? 2 minutes, okay. Oh dear, too much to say. I think this point is very, maybe we can finish on this. We talked about the importance of the teacher and about giving time to relationship. This is the most important skill, how to build up and form and maintain meaningful relationships. This is what's going to give our children those qualities we talked about at the beginning, which was the confidence and the ability to know oneself, to work in teams, to find a job that one enjoys. So you have to find the right teachers, and you have to give time and attention, and that's very hard in a busy society where we're rushing around all the time. And, you know, we just feel, for example, the child lying on the bench, a classic response would be, you're in school, hurry up, you need to get learning, why aren't you enjoying the playground? And poking the child. But actually, allowing this child a bit of time to rest, he's actually recharging his batteries, you know, and it's all part of his rhythm. And if we can just allow that, we're giving a huge respect for our children. So to summarize, let's see, I have to go on, miss out all this. The relationship is all. It's a matter of life to the child. How we treat the child will treat the world. And we see that in the children's play. And be careful what you teach the children. You might get in the way of their learning. I think if we can preserve wonder and respect and learn to observe the children, and most importantly, remember that they're taking in every essence of who we are, so we think very carefully about the adults that we want around our children, then that's how we're giving them a good education. It's not just about getting ready for school. As we all know today, it's an education for life that matters. Thank you.